Good evening and welcome to the Monday, February 27 Muscatine School Board of Education work session. Madam Secretary, can you please take roll and help us determine the quorum, please?
Yes. Directors Connard.
Here.
Cooney.
Here.
DeBeat.
Here.
LaRue.
Here.
Morgan.
Here.
Phillips.
Here.
Sure.
Here.
Quorum is present.
Thank you. Can you please stand so that we can recite the Pledge of the Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
States of America, republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'd like to start our meeting by welcoming our visitors and media representatives that are with us tonight. And moving forward with our agenda, we move into the 2023-24 budget discussion. And that's with Tom, please.
Sure. Well, good evening, everybody. So I have a few slides here. We're going to go over about 23-24. First thing I want to draw your attention to, though, is I did place this card at your table. Some of you might have seen it at ISB convention at the ISFIS table, but it's just a nice kind of colorful diagram of the different funding sources for schools and where they come from, whether it's property tax or state aid or self enterprise fund or so. On the back then, there's also some finance terms that I'll probably be mentioning tonight. So if you don't know what something is, please ask or flip the card over and it'll be on there. Okay, so first of all, our agenda tonight, I'm going to go over these bullet items regarding enrollment, spending authority components, property tax. Some financial indicators that I've brought to you every year. Other levies that make up our levy rate besides the general fund, and then our proposed property tax rate. So I also want to mention that the proposed property tax rate is preliminary, and I think you all are aware of the property tax valuations that came out were not correct. So if you kind of follow what happens in Des Moines, last week I think the governor signed the bill so that the county auditors now have like 15 days to go back and recalculate all the property tax valuations in the county. So I think by our budget work session, or excuse me, even by the date we set our public hearing on March 20th, I believe we should have the actual document that'll get published in the paper. But for now, I'm using the rates that were included in the documents that we get from the Department of Management. So just know that our property tax rate probably won't go down by as much as it's being presented tonight. So I'm going to just review ESSER, a short ESSER summary, and then we'll just touch on our self-funding insurance and then our revenue purpose statement that we need to talk about the timeline and then, the next steps in this whole process. So regarding our budget, we're going to kind of focus on the one side of the formula is our enrollment. So our certified or budget enrollment is that number of resident students, and then we have the other weightings also for special education and some additional weightings that we get to add to our enrollment that I'll go over. So supplementary weightings, there's other subgroups of students that we get to include in our enrollment. So you're familiar with most of them. English language learners, we get to add to our enrollment, and then sharing is also one. Shared positions, I guess that is, we do have one shared position with Muscatine Community College that we get to add two students or to our enrollment for that. There's also the preschool budget enrollment. As you are aware, for every preschool student in our statewide voluntary program, we get to count 50% of that student for funding. So we're going to look at these different ones. So first of all is our head count. This is Muscatine District's head count enrollment. So we declined by 29.7 students. So in October of 2022, that was October 1st, that was our count date. So actually, I'm going to flip to the next slide here. That 29.7 was actually the lowest that our enrollment has declined the last 10 years. So if that's I guess a positive note, it's been since I've been here, it's been as high as 158. I think that was the first year that I came. I was trying not to take that personally, but we've been as high as 158, 148. So, we'll see what the trend is now. And then we have special education weightings. So that increased by 15.9 students. So it's not October 1st, I believe it's November, end of November or end of October, beginning of November, we take special education count weighting. So level 1, 2, 3, they're all weighted differently. And so we get that count from the AEA helps with that count. And so we did have an increase of 2.4%.
Do you want us to ask questions now or later?
Go ahead and ask away.
So that 15.9 students, is that?
Oh.
It's probably geared more towards the weighting. That's what my question is. My question is probably geared more towards Becky. Is that, how many students is that of an increase, or is it more kids that have more needs?
I'm reporting the weighted enrollment, so not the number of students. And I didn't print page 2 of this, otherwise it's on my other page. So I can't tell you off the top of my head what level increase we had in each level, but do you have? Yeah.
All right. It's not really that important, but if it's 15 more students or if it's 14 more students,
right.
It's different than having 5 kids that are really severe, because that's a whole classroom.
Right. So, okay. So the next weighting is supplementary weighting. So 80.2 students we get to count for supplemental weighting. So that's basically about 1/3 of that 80 is supplemental weighting we get for concurrent enrollment. So those are the students that are taking classes at the high school that are also getting credit at MCC. Another 1/3 of that is a weighted at-risk figure that is determined basically by the state, and it looks at our free and reduced population. So that 1/3 directly goes into the funding for our at-risk programming. And the third part is our ELL. So that's another 1/3 of that 80. So those are the students that are in years 1 through 5 in the English Language Learner program that we get to count, and it's part of our aid and levy formula. And then you always see this back again in the fall, because then we get extra spending authority for the students that are in the ELL program beyond 5 years. So, and then one more time we get that extra spending authority. We ask the SBRC for the amount that we overspend. Okay. And so this is our total weighted enrollment, the decline about 0.3. So here's our statewide voluntary preschool, 118.5, a decrease of 4%. And remember, that's 0.5 of a student, because that's what we get to count. So I just made this other graph is included. We're there at 118. 0.5. You can see back in 2013, we were at the 154. So still down, probably, I'm not exactly sure why, but I'm down since COVID, I guess, so.
Does that number come from birth rates, or where do you
Well,
get the
these are-
estimated, well, not the actuals, I mean for 2024 estimate?
That is the number of students enrolled in October 1st of 2022. So the 118 and a half that we're getting funding for in 2024 was our actual
Why is that
count
hard?
in October 1st of 22. So that counts the students we're serving in Muscatine schools as well as our community partners.
So if any legislation passes to move that to the 1%, that will not, we won't see that for a couple of years.
Well, it depends on, I remember hearing something about this. So obviously, is it still in the works about increasing the funding for 4-year-olds?
Friday, I
So,
think so, yeah.
okay. It very well could be next year. That's still a possibility, but I have not heard any other specifics about that. But so you've often heard me talk about spending authority, and this is a very important concept to understand for the general fund. We are limited in the total spending by the number of students we have times what each student is worth. And then there's a number of components that I'll go over here. And the regular program district cost, the budget guarantee, and then the revenue program district cost with the budget guarantee. I'll go over those. And then those are those supplementary weightings, special ed, district cost. So there's 4 more that are included in our spending authority, and that's teacher salary supplement. That goes directly towards teacher salary. Professional development, obviously, is used for teacher professional development. Early intervention, that is an amount districts get for K-3. Basically, we use it in our district for class, basically for K through 3 teachers in any grade level. And then teacher leadership compensation, so our TLC program. Also, the amount that we, for the AEA district costs. So the AEA is not a taxing authority, so every school district in Iowa is taxed, and then that money is just flows through to the AEA, and that's part of our spending authority. But it's basically an in and an out. We record revenue, and we record the exact same amount in expense every year. The last component there before we go on is that dropout prevention. So that's that at-risk modified supplemental amount that we ask every January, or we just did in January. We approved that for next year. So our regular program district cost, all right, based on our enrollment decline of 29.7 students, adding the 3% SSA, this is actually an increase then of $795,439. So that 3% equates to 2.3 for Muscatine schools next year. However, we're going to decline in the amount of budget guarantee because we will not be affected by the budget guarantee next year because of the amount of increase we had. So when you net those two out, basically, it's a $695,000 increase, or 2%. So remember, that budget guarantee is like that 1-year cushion that is given to Iowa public schools to basically get through, districts if they have declining enrollment and such. So our supplementary weightings then saw a small increase of about $4,000. And all these next weightings that I'm talking about, there's already designated purposes for these, the funding that we're going to get behind these. So for supplementary weighting, we turn around and we pay MCC for the concurrent enrollment, or we use the ELL portion towards our ELL programming, or we use the weighted at-risk supplementary weighting for our at-risk programming. So same with special education. We'll have an increase of $267,000, but as you're well aware, we put all that, or that is for our special education program. So, as well as the rest of these, teacher salary supplement, we're going to see an increase of $68,000, but that is part of the teacher salary schedule and will basically be paid out to teachers every year as part of their regular, or part of their base, or part of their contract, right? So, and then professional development, we'll see a slight increase of 2.5%, early intervention 2.2%, and then teacher leadership. So we'll have 2.3% increase for our TLC programming next year, which a majority of that is paying for teacher leaders. So our dropout prevention, then, that is what was approved in January. So our modified supplemental amount, we ask for basically $21,000 more next year. I'll show you how all this comes together in our property tax rate here at the end. So our combined district costs, you're going to look at that and go, wow, 1.3 million. Well, remember how much of the supplementary weightings we just went through and what is technically available for what's called new money, and that's that $600 and some thousand. So of the 1.3, only 600 and some thousand is really available for next year. The others we're going to be using, but they're going to be used for those specific purposes. So the challenges that we are going to be facing, I would say most of you are aware of the ESSER funding cliff, or maybe you've heard that terminology. You've certainly heard of ESSER. That's part of our miscellaneous income, and you see that every month on our revenue financials that I report. That does end in September of '24. I'm going to review that here in later slides, but there's the continuation of programs that we added during COVID that we've used ESSER. And staffing, have we leveled off? You know, over the several years that I've been here, we've kind of managed right-sizing our district without having to do layoffs or anything, but so are we at that level where, you know, when we're going to be, obviously you all are aware that there's positions that we haven't been able to fill, so those are still budgeted for. So maybe we've leveled off. And obviously, you know, staying competitive, all of our groups, from teachers to custodial staff, you know, we want to stay competitive. So it's just going to be those are the challenges that I think that we will have over the next several years. So the property taxes for the general fund, the funding per student is paid for by a combination of that local property tax and then state aid. And you can kind of think of this as for Muscatine schools, our funding is basically 1/3 property taxes to 2/3 state aid. And that's similar to how it is statewide. And it's that mix of property tax and state aid is determined by the formula, which I'll go over next here, which, you know, is it equitable? You know, there's obviously districts that have higher property valuations. The district that always gets compared is Okoboji. If you're familiar with that area, they have very high valuations in that district, so they need less property tax. So the 5 components of our general fund property tax. So there's the uniform levy, or the 540 is what you might hear. And then we have that additional levy, that instructional support levy, which we do have in our district. And then there's the cash reserve levy. And although it's on two different lines here, we just, there's a maximum cash reserve levy between the SBRC. What that means is, remember a couple times a year when I come to you and we ask for that additional spending authority, we go to the SBRC. We want additional spending authority for overspending special education, ELL. That's what that SBRC cash reserve levy means, because I've always said we're using our existing cash reserves to, when we're overspending or when we're spending for our special ed program, our ELL program. And then there's just a general cash reserve would be other. Typically, we don't, we're not in a position where we have to levy millions of dollars in cash reserve because there is a limit. 20% of our expenditures from the prior year, and if that, and then we look at our fund balance from FY 22 or 21, excuse me. So, and I'll go over that here in the next slide or the next few slides. So, the uniform levy, or that 540, generates $892,000 for our district. The additional levy is going to be declining by $23,500. And if, again, there's a lot of property tax relief efforts that are made and funnel into our aid and levy for public school districts. So, although we are a district of declining enrollment, we should see some sort of decline in additional levy because of those things that are happening at the state, I guess. So our cash reserve, it will decline by $242,000, and I'll explain that here in a bit. So our total general fund levy will increase the asking of $760,000. Although our property tax rate will decline, and I'm going to go over that here. So here's that general fund property tax graph, FY23 compared to 24. So there's that 540, and then there's the additional levy. So that additional levy is going down. And then there's that instructional support levy. So that's that 10% of our regular program district costs that we have in our general fund, and that's all property tax and income surtax. There's no state aid behind that, but that is how much that costs per $1,000, or in our property tax rate. And then there's that cash reserve levy, that's 46 cents. So this graph you've seen before. This is our spending authority. I should have had that other, I'm going to bump forward to, oh wait, that's at the end. Sorry, there's a few more slides. So this is that spending authority financial indicator, our UAB, the remaining legal spending authority at the end of the fiscal year. We want to maintain an adequate unspent authorized budget to provide legal authority to spend unassigned fund balance. So this graph just shows estimated for FY23, the remaining FY23, our maximum authorized budget of $80 million. Our maximum spending authority to break even is at 65. And so our actual expenditures right now are projected to be around 66 million. And again, a majority of that is because of ESSER and the HVAC projects that we have going on. And in that slide at the end, we'll show you how much of ESSER we're estimating to spend this year. So we're right at that 18% at the end of this year. Based on the funding formula, we should be right at 18% at the end of next year. So We're just under the state average as of FY21. I did not find the FY22 statewide figures yet, but 5 to 15%, we're well within that recommended range, and we're not over. I always like to make sure, or talk to the directors, talk to the superintendent about making sure we spend that authority that we're generating every year. And the next financial indicator is that solvency ratio. And that's that snapshot point in time measure of revenue remaining, assuming we actually had to close our doors on June 30th, how much would we have available to paying our obligations for that year? So you can see, we are have probably what I would say a trend of going down, but we're actually still in very decent position with that. So maybe we were a little high there back in 16, 17, but I think it's important to remember, basically our funding, we get our final state aid in June, we get our final property tax payments in April, so we still have July and August bills to pay, teacher contracts to pay, so we just have enough resource to get until we start getting funding for the next year. So there are certain, as part of our overall property tax rate, there's other pieces of that I'll go over here. Every month, I believe, I do show you the balances in all these funds. Obviously, activity fund is self-generating fund. Management fund, that is a property tax fund. Sales tax, that's that statewide penny. And then I created a fund 34 to keep track of our capital projects based on those revenue bonds that we sold. And then there's that physical plant and equipment levy fund. That's the other piece of our property tax. There's debt service, but you guys are aware that we don't have any general obligation debt. We just have to have that fund to pay those revenue debts that when principal and interest are due. Our nutrition fund is an enterprise fund, and then we have two self-funding health insurance and dental, and then we have an agency fund. So the property tax ones are the management and then fund 36. So our management fund, I think I've talked to you before in the past about how what uses are in the management fund, and those are our early retirement plan, paying those early retirement incentives, workers' comp, our EMC insurance, property casualty insurance, that local government risk pool for natural gas. Those are the main ones. And so we always have to look out at least 2 or 3 years, because come July 1st, we excuse me. Come July 1st, we have to pay 23, 24 bills for EMC, for property casualty insurance. We have to make our first quarterly payment to the early retirement program. We have to pay our workers' comp insurance. So that's why we needed that enough resource at the end of June to pay those bills, and then we'll start collecting property tax in October and then the following April. So our revenue, we did have to increase our management fund by looking out, because we increased, and I can't remember off the top of my head either, about the dollar amount over the next 5 years we're going to be paying for these new early retirees. But it's all included in the 1.7 million, and then our expenditures of 1.6, So our physical plant and equipment levy, the revenues of 4.1 actually include the transfers in from the general fund for those ESSER projects that we're doing, the HVAC work and so forth. So it's not, so that's about, what is that, what did I say that was? It was 2.7 million of that 4.1 million is actually projected that we're going to transfer from the general fund to PEPL for those projects next year. Because our PEPL fund actually generates around 2.7 million. And then, and again, the activity fund, to look at next year, all I do is look at last year's actual, look at what estimated revenue and expenses are this year and increase it 10% or not even 10%, probably 5% or so for next year. Again, I think Mike's fully aware how the activity fund works, but it's basically generates money from, gate receipts, fundraising, donations from booster groups. So that's where they generate their revenue. Our debt service fund, obviously, the beginning and ending balance is going to be zero because we transfer exactly the amount that we need from Fund 33 to Fund 40 every month to make those semi-annual principal or interest payments and annual principal. We already know what those are going to be. And then the nutrition fund, again, looking forward to next year. Our sales tax fund, that's adding, I'm pretty much looking at Fund 33 and 34 together. So you might see a lot less revenue in 24 because we won't have as much, this current year we sold $25 million worth of revenue bonds, and then obviously the expenditures. Expenditures are always tricky with capital projects because you have to look at the timing of when everything happens. And so we can make our best guesstimate, but, this is what we're guesstimating right now. So when you look at our non-general fund property tax rate, you can see which fund makes up the rest of our property tax rate. Our management fund, as I said, is going to go up. Our voter PEPL will stay the same, and our board PEPL will stay the same. Because there's just a maximum that we can tax for on that. $1.67 total. This document you've seen in the past. This is the proposed rate. Right now it's projected to go down 30 cents, but it's probably going to be a little less. It'll be less than that. I really am not exactly sure yet. When I did correspond with the county assessor, and he seemed to think we'll still be in that 8 to 10% increase. Right now it's a 11.8% increase in our property valuation. So again, I'll have that information at our March 20th when we set the public hearing. But you can see there that our general fund rate, or out of our total rate, our general fund is the 10.35, management, and then capital projects. So this slide here is just a way to look at, if our property tax rate goes down by 31 cents, how much does that, how does that affect the residential property tax owner with an assessed valuation of $250,000? So, and again, those assessments are not based on the correct assessments right now, but assumptions made in there that it's assumed the eligible homestead tax credit is being used. So So our certified budget expenditures and total property tax rate, so this is just a very condensed snapshot of what gets published in the paper, and the only reason it's condensed here is because those are those 4 functional categories that we have to monitor and I bring to you every few months. So obviously the 113% increase in total other, that is strictly the construction projects that we have going on. That's the reason why it's so high from FY22 to FY24. And the non-instructional part, that's food service, and I'm just making sure we have enough in there based on the settlements we have with food service and then increased food costs. So remember, it's the estimated property tax rate. Okay, any questions on that, any of that so far? So the next slide is just a summary of what our district has spent and what we are projected to spend with the ESSER. Now, I have several different ESSER categories up here. That's because that's how it came to schools, but I guess I would just look at for FY23, the 5.6 million. And again, some of that is based on timing of construction projects that are going on for our HVAC projects. The bottom part, I think, is very important, something that we are talking about at the directors' meetings, and that's the number of positions that we have currently being funded by ESSER. About around 22 position or 22 FTE, and then there's some contracted services that we are spending using ESSER dollars for. So some of those programs with Robert Young are ones that we started during COVID. We do have a contracted nurse that we just continued. We had it prior to COVID, we contracted, and then we just kept that position once we knew it would be needed during those first several years of COVID. And, there's online school that we contract with a company. And then you can see the first 5 lines with the positions. So any questions on this page?
I guess my question would be, and maybe it comes later, but out of that 1.2, do we have an idea of how many of those are the important ones to keep and what we may be able to slide off?
Are you referring to the positions?
Yes.
I think so.
Yeah, I apologize.
We will, as we go through next year, continue to have those conversations. But, talking with staff, what's been effective, what we need to hang on to, and if we hang on to it, where is it going to fit within the existing budget? So there are a lot of pieces that are involved.
So it will not affect right away.
It doesn't take effect next year, but we need to be having the conversations
Right.
as we go into next year so we can be prepared for that following year.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I'm going to jump up to the next slide, which is just one pager of our self-funding health insurance. So I'll just draw your attention to the bottom 2 lines in gray, or I'm sorry, the claims per fixed cost there in red, in orange, I guess. the second one, $1,055.05. So the first column is what we ended a full calendar year, $900.74 of fixed claim of claims per fixed cost per employee per month. The next column is actually July through January. I wanted to make sure you knew that. So the first column is actual year to date, and then the next column is July through January of 23. So as of January of 2023, we're at $1,055.05. So it's increased 17.6% or 17%, but if you go down to the bottom line, that's how much we're funding our health insurance self-funding pool this year, $1,056.73 per employee per month. So we're right now, we're still through January. So we still have 5 months to go. We monitor it every month. We get good advice from Holmes Murphy. They provide us with lots of information about our plan. Then the next slide is just, as you know, starting July 1st of 2022, we did self-fund our dental. And so this is July of 22 through, I believe it is December of, or did she give me January? It is through December. And we're at 92% of our paid claims versus expected claims, which is right at where we're at a good point. Okay, so just a 0.6% increase. And remember, the last 2 years we were fully insured. So, all right, moving right along. So we're going to talk about the revenue purpose statement. So that's for the sales tax revenue that we get. I think in front of you, I did give you the language to the ballot item that was in the September 8th of 2015. This is what was approved by the voters of Muscatine. And obviously this goes through 2030. And what you're wanting to do based on your direction was to put this on the ballot in November at the regular school board election. So remember, the renewal does not determine whether the tax will be collected. That's state law, and they have the penny sales tax for schools. The revenue purpose statement, RPS, is basically just a renewal that directs how the revenues for the district will be spent. And this one page, I kind of summed it up in the one line. It's basically the same uses as what Iowa code allows us to spend physical plant and equipment levy for. So if it's a consensus of the board, I'll just move forward with having Allers and Cooney draft the new RPS, and it would have to be approved at potentially the March 20th board meeting to approve the resolution and call for the election. And we have plenty of time to get it on the November ballot, but September 22nd is that last date that we could get it to the county auditor. And remember, that does require that 50% plus one. So, and then have to give the other side, if it fails, what happens. So we would just have to wait 6 months. But based on the timing of when schools can have special elections, we would not be able to have another vote till September of 2024.
The expiration of that's 2031, right? Current. We can extend it out to 2051.
Right. That is exactly right.
So the original legislation for those saved dollars went through 2030. So that's where that first revenue purpose statement that you passed, Then they extended it to 2050, so at some point, we just have to re-extend 2050 period.
So yeah, I think the ballot language is pretty standard, so unless something is changed, it'll probably look very similar. But Allers and Cooney would be our counselor on that, so. All right, so
Is that something you need a motion on, or?
I don't think we need
Start
to,
a work session.
the vote would come at the board meeting
Right.
on March 20th, but I think unless there's some other reason not to, we can have the resolution drawn up and presented, and then you can vote on it.
A lot of districts have already done this. We just, again, we certainly could wait, but I think it's good to just get it done and have it updated. And again, when people are voting on it, they're only voting on how we spend those dollars. It's guaranteed funds, so by voting no, it doesn't go away. We still receive those dollars. So it doesn't impact property taxes or anything like that.
So those bonds that we sold will be paid off by 2030. So it's after that is what renewing this is going to affect, how it can be used after 2030. I mean, we have no general obligation debt, so that's the number one thing that would have to be used for is property tax relief, but so we'll approve the budget guarantee resolution. Remember, I just talked at the beginning that we don't need it next year, but I think it's very important. It doesn't hurt anything to approve it. And I think as we go forward, year after year, we're probably going to need it more than not needing it. And so I just want that to be on the front of of the board members to know why we're doing it, even though we may not need it for FY24. To me, it's been kind of not common that we already know what our SSA is already. Typically, I'm standing here talking about, well, it could be 2% or it could be 0% or whatever, but we are in that unique position. So approving the revenue purpose statement resolution, March 20th, and then setting the public hearing on March 20th for April 17th. And remember, April 30th, or actually May 1st, is now when schools have to get their budgets to the county auditor, because that law got pushed back to, or that deadline got pushed back too, with the changes that all the county auditors are going to have to make. So we don't have to. I was kind of concerned that we might have to have a special meeting or something just to approve the property tax or the budget for next year, but we can do it all at regular board meetings. So I would say by the March 20th, when we're setting our public hearing, that I'll have that final property tax rate that I'll show you. And then we do have to finalize our health and dental rates for 23-24. So we're kind of last discussion, we're getting quotes for the Jiminy Crickets. The terminology has lost me, Clint. What?
You just made me forget too.
It's regarding the stop loss. Sorry about that. So we're getting quotes on our stop loss premium. And we should know, I think Clint and I are having a meeting with Holmes Murphy yet this week, I believe. So we'll get preliminary, and then I kind of want to bring that health insurance committee back together one more time before the finalizing everything. So that's what's next. All right. Any questions? Feel free to reach out to me. You all know my contact information. You know where I live. Well, here anyway, where I physically live, but I'm here a lot. So So feel free to reach out anytime.
Tom, I have a quick question.
Okay.
In
Fire away.
regards to property tax, you know, as we are seeing more and more buildings in Muscatine and more homes and so on, don't you think this will bring more
Yes, I would say,
dollar amount?
in my correspondence with the county assessor, he did say let's see, I have the email, so let me quote that. Okay, we had a great market the last couple of years, is what the quote was from the county county assessor. So, I mean, it goes on, but that's basically the message that I got. So yes, you are correct, and hence the 8 to 10% increase we might still see. So,
Okay,
yep.
thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Thank you for your trust in me in doing this. My 23rd or so budget presentation. It changes a little bit every year, but it's all good.
Thank you,
very
Tom.
much.
You kept it under an hour. That was good.
These guys are shocked back here because I showed them 54 slides this morning, and they're like, we're bringing our pillow to take a nap, so. But they're not. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you. Moving forward with our agenda, the next item is facility updates with Ryan, please.
Thank you, guys. I'm going to bring you back down to my speed. We're going to give you a picture book. So, with us tonight, I have Rachel Foster from Leggett Architects and Jesse Smith from Russell Construction, just to help work through our design updates, budget updates, and then be able to answer any questions that you guys have as we move through. So we're going to look at our controlled entrances, the expansion of Jefferson, which is the first thing up on our list, wrestling room, and then baseball, softball tonight. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rachel, and then we'll go.
Hello. So we don't have too many updates for the first few projects here. I just wanted to give an update on how we're doing. So we've been meeting with the schools and checking in on getting into more of the nitty-gritty details of what they're going to need in each classroom and materials, and just going through with Principal Steele and making sure everybody's happy each step of the way, working through design. So should I slide on here or this? There we go. And then this is similar rendering to what you've seen before. So not much has changed here at Jefferson. We're just starting to work through more of the coordination with all of our engineers and working through some of the grading and making sure we can have everything come through as we've designed here. So this one's working through starting construction documents soon, and then we'll be out to bid in May. And then, I don't know if you want to go through budget right now on this one.
Just real quick, on the budget costs, we have direct costs about 5.8 million. That would be the cost from the subcontractors. And then general conditions, construction contingency, fees, including design, totals out to about 7.6 million with another $300,000 in FF&E. For a total of 7.9 million.
And this includes that shelter?
Yeah, so this includes, right now we have planned for one classroom being a storm shelter. We're still in negotiations with how that's going to work out with the city, but that would include that design cost in there. And just so you guys, that FF&E, that's like furniture, equipment, things like that need to go into the building. So we have a certain percentage allotted for that as we move forward.
I got a question. Asbestos abatement, because I know we had a conversation about with the wall and how, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, so we know that there's no asbestos in Jefferson. What we might run into with the wall going into Central, we've had that building abated, but that doesn't mean that there's not something in the walls that we don't know about. So just having it there right now, there's no number associated with it because we're assuming that we probably won't have much, if any, to do. But once we get into central, we could have some asbestos things that we're going to have to deal with, and as we start to tear into walls.
Remember, we put in contingency in there, both design contingency and construction contingency. As we get closer to final bid, that design contingency, those dollars should be going away. And then as things come up with construction, as they typically do, that's where we would, we have some budget set aside for that.
Okay, thank you.
So moving into the controlled entrances, these are moving into construction documents now. So just some notes to highlight is that we'll be doing the same, or planning for the same security film on the glazing at the front that's done at McKinley Elementary right now, and a lot of the same, layouts and sizing as that addition as well. And we worked with the civil engineer to adjust some of the grading of the parking lot, so we're able to have a curb now between the parking lot surface and the entrance to the school, so that'll help with some of the safety issues of right now the parking lot being level with walking right up to the school entrance doors. And so that's the same with Madison as well. We were able to make that grading adjustment for a curb there to help really identify where the edge of the parking lot is versus the sidewalk for students and parents to be standing on. And the same comment with the security film glazing at the front entrance of this one as well. So yeah, not much has changed since you last saw this one. And then in Susan Clark, we have adjusted a little bit of the canopy design and overhang. We still have about 300 square feet of coverage outside the front doors, but we integrate that into the building mass here, as opposed to having a separate canopy piece sticking out with columns supporting it. And then moving into budgets, I think this is.
So on this budget here, we are showing combined between the Grant, Madison, and Susan Clark additions, about $5.3 million in direct contractor costs. General conditions and construction and design contingencies were at about 6.1 million combined. And then fees puts us at 6.7 total, and another 300,000 or so in FF&E puts us at 7 million for this project.
These are the same.
Is that a May bid too, or when are you putting that one out to bid?
That one's out in April. Going on to the wrestling room. So this one changed a little bit since you last saw it. We compacted the size of it to push it all up against the existing wrestling room. We still have the 2 mats that we talked about last time, but saved a lot of that kind of pre-function space that we talked about last time. And so this helps save some costs by compacting it down, and we just had to rework some of the exiting from the existing gym. And then this one is on track to, or we're working towards completing it before the winter season.
And cost not included because it's not
It's not
a
part of the
project.
It's not part of the bond project, but I think the last bid for this particular one was 1.3. I think when we had it here to the board, the last time we were close to 2 million. We went back, looked at a couple different variations, and based on how those laid out, came back to this design, which is 1.3.
Thank you.
Did we find anything out about what that, I guess, I don't know if it's a doorway or just the accessibility from the existing room to the new, what I know there was like load bearing questions and things too about what kind of access coaches could have to both rooms.
Yeah, with that door between the existing and the new. I think we've talked about whether that's a swing door like you're talking about here, or maybe an overhead door that can be fire rated for that connection, but also, you know, pulled up for that access between. So I think budgeting wise, we were considering those options. We'll work with the coaches on that preference. And then, I don't know how you wanted to approach the softball, baseball conversation.
I'll come on over here right now. So, with softball, baseball, we've been going through a number of options as we've moved forward. I think, Clint, this is what, 13 or 14 different options right now with these guys? But as we've looked at this project, we knew that budget had to come back in line. We were getting really close to $10 million between the two fields. And from facility committee and from other conversations, we knew that we had to draw that back as we have more projects in phase 2 coming up as well. So our latest option is to bring the softball field back to the high school on existing property, not necessarily changing much of the softball. Basically, what we've been planning for at softball all along is still going to go in this facility, just on our property. This also enables us to do a couple things with the visitor side of the football stadium that will, you know, with a concession stand and some restrooms and things like that, that will make that a little bit nicer to view a game from there, but also help us with some crowd control as the way we plan for football games. And then still looking at Bruner to redo that in, you know, a pretty nice, we're still doing grandstands, still doing an updated concession stand, still doing some parking, still, you know, we have Bush Sports Turf coming in this spring to work on the field itself. So there's still a lot of things that are happening down there to update that facility. It is well needed. What the other thing that we've done out here is we've pulled lights out of this to just work with Musco directly. So I'll give, so in the end, what this brings us down to is all-in projected cost of about $6.3 million. Which if you guys remember, when we came to you originally, it was right around $6 million all in cost. So we're really close to where we were at when we first presented to you guys.
So again, one of the things as we, you know, as more of the scope became clear in order to do a complex down there with increasing costs and increasing scope, separating any costs from the city, the district cost, what we were going to build, was at $9.7 million, and we knew that was too high. That included putting full turf on the baseball field as well. The cost for baseball for turf, for the entire field to be in turf, is $1.5 million. With fees, that's closer to $1.75 million. So right now, that recommendation is to keep it with grass. You'll notice we've kept it into the softball bid. The difference between softball having turf and a grass field is $200,000. Because if you're doing a regular grass field brand new, you're still putting in irrigation, you're doing a lot of that same work anyway, so you don't see that cost difference that you do for baseball. What we'll also recommend is doing an alternate bid for full turf. We're also looking at partial turf for baseball. Everything comes in great, you know, fees are way down, people are really competitive on the bids. Maybe we have the budget to do it at that point, right? But having to lay this out and trying to get that budget back down to where we were, again, as new scope became known to us, so by putting those two fields together, you've got the bike path that runs right down the center. Well, we've got to relocate that bike path. We have to do that, right? there's cost associated with that. We had to, because we have the complex there together, we had to build a significant parking lot. Well, we're still putting some parking in at Bruner, but not, there's about $500,000 in parking that we're taking out of there. All of those things add up to the difference between, even with removing, again, not even thinking about the city costs at all, the difference between this particular project with it, moving it to the high school and keeping it at Bruner is $2.5 million. And that's, again, with removing the turf from baseball as well. So in talking with coaches, talking with the facility committee, this would be the recommended option for softball, baseball. Even though I think all of us really love that idea of having that complex and having, the teams together, we still have work to do with Susan Clark with the gymnasium there that we know has to get bigger. We're doing work still with Central and tearing down the classroom piece and updating some things there. So we still have other projects to do. We also have roofs that will need to be replaced and other ongoing maintenance. So I'm really feeling like, how do we get that number back? And as we ran these new numbers, this is how we do it.
I appreciate you doing that. So this monies that we're talking about is considered the phase 2 of things, and then we still have phase 3, so to speak?
No, softball, baseball would still be kind of in this current phase that we're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, with this, we'd be starting construction as soon as seasons were over, so July-ish, late July. So then they would be ready to play like for the next softball season, next baseball season.
2024 season.
Yeah, 2024. And that is one of the advantages going with turf at softball. As we're building a new field, we have no growing seasons with artificial turf. And that's one of the reasons why, if you look at Bruner, staying with that natural surface, it's already there. Yes, we have things to do to update that surface, and we know that, and we're going to do that, but we don't have to wait for a growing season to make that playable. Whereas softball, we'd be another possible year out, depending on when that came through.
So would turf in the future be in store for Bruner? Is that what we're looking at, maybe at the next round?
I think that would be my recommendation as we think about those projects when we get into that 2030 and beyond, just from a maintenance standpoint, and not having to worry about rainouts or, and some of those other things. I think it's, it's the right thing to do. In the meantime, meeting with the coach and laying out what needs to happen with that grass surface now to make sure it's safe, it looks great, it's playable, and we maintain that in the appropriate way. And so what are the equipment needs? What are the, things that we need to do? So trying to lay that out as well. And again, still with the hope that maybe bids come in differently and we can have a conversation with you as a board and still look at some turf for baseball.
Turf is down the road a little bit, possibly. How much more will it cost a few years from now to do that as opposed to doing it now?
It's likely going to be higher. How much higher, it's hard to say.
Any other questions, comments, concerns before we step away?
Pictures would have been nice, Ryan.
For baseball,
For the field,
softball?
yeah.
So, and the
Just
reason
next
we
time.
didn't do those yet is because the softball isn't really that much different than what we've been proposing before. And with this iteration of this project, we are just getting kind of down the road of what that's going to look like on that spot. So I'll have one of those for you as soon as we can get that done.
And I will say I've apologized to Leggett and to Russell because we continue to come back with them. Hey, can you look at this option? Can you try this? We've talked about, can you fit both baseball and softball at the high school? And we try to move things around again. So again, when Ryan said, is this option 13, 14, 15, it literally, we've been having them going back and give us different costs and different updates. How about this? And at some point, that's part of the reason it's hard for them to draw when they don't know exactly what and where they're drawing for. So they've been kind of holding off on some of that, and once we get a better idea of exactly where we're going, and I think based on the budget, based on conversations with facility committee, I think this is the path that makes the most sense for us as a district.
Brian, do you anticipate having to move something, say those big cement blocks that hold your?
Yeah, there's going to be some small things that we're going to have to move by the facility building.
Right.
If I did my measurements correctly, which I'm pretty sure I did, we don't have to move shot put or discus back there. We can just rotate those, the throwing rings just slightly to still have those in place, so we don't have to like relocate track field events for track away from the stadium, which will be nice as well.
Any other questions?
Just a last piece too. And so again, with Bruner, we are still working with the city on next steps in that process, because obviously we have to own, Bruner has to be our property for us to invest these bond dollars in that. So working with the city, with Carol Webb, and with Mayor Bark, we'll develop a timeline, because there's a process that they'll have to go through for the city to work with any property like that. There's a process to go through. So, but again, we'll make sure that gets taken care of, and we'll keep you posted on that as we move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you. Appreciate that. Okay, moving forward with our agenda, the next item is superintendent updates. Clint?
You've had a lot of stuff already, so I wasn't going to put too many things on here. One, just a reminder that Friday is kind of that first funnel for legislation, so we'll see what happens on Friday, what goes through. Doesn't mean that legislation can't come back in different ways. That does happen sometimes, but we'll certainly be keeping a close eye on that for Friday. Also, just wanted to give John a shout out for his Presidential Lifetime Achievement Award there, volunteering. It's a great honor, and just want to say thank you to you for all that you do for the community.
Thank you. Thank you. It's as I always say, it's not just me. It takes a village or a town to do what we have to do all together. So thanks for everyone that decided to walk the journey with me throughout my life. So thank you. Anything else? Okay, thank you, Clint. Thank you. Well, moving forward to next second reading on policies, 708.2, free or reduced cost meals eligibility, 601.29, media center, 501.9, insufficient classroom space, and 600.5, conditions of instructions, and that is, the recommendation is to delete this one. Any questions about any of those policies?
I do want to go back to Lindsay's point from the last time. We do need to create administrative procedures for that kind of spells that out from what we're taking away in 600.5. We just have not done that yet, so we'll have that for you the next time. If for some reason we can't, I'll just pull 501.9 until we have that done, and we'll bring it back.
I did try to help out a little bit and look at what other districts are doing in Iowa, and there's not a lot that are they're not here yet. I think we might be a little ahead of the game, if that's fair to say, because they're still very much leaving that policy in place, whether it is just spelling out classroom space or they've embedded it into some balanced enrollment policies or something like that. So, but I do think, I just want to repeat too that classroom space is addressed in 501.9. We're not just deleting that. I know that I had a couple people ask for clarification on that. So we know classroom space is important, and it's not being deleted, or one's being deleted. It's addressed here.
Thank you, Lindsay, for the clarification. Any other question? Okay, thank you. The next item is announcements. of upcoming meetings and events. March 7, Riverbend Mobile Food Pantry, 4 to 5:30 at the Muscatine Community School District Admin Center. March 9, 2-hour early dismissal. March 10, teacher in service, no school. March 13 to 17, spring break, no school. And I'm sure everybody's looking forward for that week, right? So March 20th, a school board community conversation at 6 p.m. at the lower level City Hall. And March 20th, regular board meeting at 7 p.m. at the City Hall. Any other announcement?
John, I just wanted to take a second. Last week, I contacted Ryan, and he got right back to me. But it made me realize that I hadn't said thank you to our directors for all the work that you guys do. I kind of look at you guys like umpires or officials that if we don't notice you, that means you're doing an awesome job. And I don't want you to think that we don't notice you or I don't notice you, but I just want to take a minute to say thank you for what you do.
Thank you, Mike. Anything else? Okay, at this point, we want to take around 5 minutes break to move into a closed session. So if we can just have the 5 minutes and go to the west,
Yes,
right?
we will be in the West Room for closed session.
Do we have to have a motion
John.
to go into it?
I think we need to
Yeah,
have a roll call.
I would make a motion that we move into a closed session.
So then we'll do a roll call vote. So I'll call your name. Aye, in favor, nay, opposed. Director Connard?
Aye.
Cooney?
Aye.
DeBeat?
Aye.
LaRue?
Aye.
Morgan?
Aye.
Phillips?
Aye.
Sure.
Aye.
Thank you.